ask you, Mr. President, you talk about, you're very frank about this, but the fact is that it's peoples like us who suffer these sort of animosities that elites have.
But it's not that simple. Part of it is that we require several fundamental changes in culture. First, the culture of the state. Mm-hmm. The culture of the state and the culture of the people has often been confused. We are in the middle of changes in the inherited hierarchical cultures of the state. And this is gradual, but I think a systematic change. Second, we require elite institutions such as yourself. So please don't put yourself on the other side. You're no longer in the category of the ultra poor. You're part of the very privileged.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. No, but the cultural elite needs to articulate an agenda that is really based on communication and cooperation. Our medias have been as responsible for our separations as have been other components of the elite. So I hope that also requires attention. But the third element is our universities, our thought leaders. The level of connectivity. When I find South Asians, for instance, when I was teaching at Johns Hopkins or at Berkeley, we all congregated regardless, or at the World Bank. We had immense friendship.
All the South Asians congregated?
All the South Asians. But when we go and lead our institutions, then it's our national thing. And this is the last. The inherited sense of state structures from Europe of 16th century is my nation right or wrong. Mm-hmm. Now we need to understand that the nation-state system, the state system, is under threat, and we can only avoid the threat by cooperation.
Okay, so we no longer really need to fly the flag that we've been flying for so many decades. But I'd like to ask you to sort of help you move away, if you like, to your own country. South Asia, we've talked about how this troubled neighborhood that we live in. But you live in an exceptionally troubled country. The American troops are going to leave sooner than later, and your own security forces are going to take charge. Are you nervous?
No. I led the security transition for 3 years. I've been to every province of Afghanistan 3 to 10 times. I've been to every garrison, every corps command. I know every single general in the Afghan army, police, and security forces. Look, we're patriots. I want to exaggerate a point. Entering Afghanistan is very easy. Getting out of it is another proposition, if people come in violence.
But are you saying that you don't need the American troops? You don't want them to stay?
Look, it's two different things. The American troops were needed in a particular moment in history. That moment has passed. They're leaving on December 31st, 2014, as agreed. But they're staying to help us train, equip, and finance. In 2001, when I went back after 24 years, the land was parched. There was no chair at the Ministry of Finance. 90% of the Ministry of Finance didn't have chairs when I took over in June of 2002. We are a different country with a lot of capabilities. Our strengths should be understood. People focus on our weaknesses. I see our strengths. And the other is, we have national will.
But is this national will, forgive me for interrupting you, Mr. President, is this national will enough to combat a resurgent Taliban?
Of course it is.
It is?
It is, because why did I win the presidency? You think if people had not, women who had not gotten into their houses for 30 years were urged by mullahs to come and vote. Mosque by mosque, yes? Look, our backwardness economically is in radical contrast to our ideas of participation in citizenship. Our advantage is precisely that we don't have an entrenched elite. So our citizens are engaged.
So the people of Afghanistan will come out and fight the Taliban and perhaps the Al-Qaeda and perhaps the Haqqani network and perhaps several other terror groups that sow mayhem in Afghanistan and across other parts of South Asia.
The people are ready. We need to make sure that we deliver on good governance, on rule of law, and on empowerment. 38% of the voters were women. That's a remarkable fact when you see that Afghanistan was subject to gender apartheid. To get 38% of the electorate being women. So, yes, we have enormous challenges.
So you're not afraid of being on your own?
No, we've been on our own for 5,000 years, for God's sake. You know, what's 5,000 more?
But on the other hand, Mr. President, your first trip, of course, you went to perform the Umrah, but after that, your first trip was to China and then to Pakistan only less than 10 days ago. You know India well, you said to me earlier. But the fact is that you have all these other countries in your neighborhood, just the three countries I mentioned, Pakistan and India and China, who want to expand their sphere of influence in your country. Are you afraid that there will be another proxy war or several proxy wars inside Afghanistan?
Nobody is going to be able to expand their sphere of influence. Everybody is welcome to cooperate. We provide the platform of cooperation.
Okay.
Look, 19th century ideas. Please put Lord Curzon aside and invoke Mahatma Gandhi and Nehru. They're two different visions. The difference is the vision of sphere of influence is product of Lord Curzon. An imposed geography, and he did not succeed. We beat the hell out of him. But the vision that the great thinkers of independence thought through needs to be realized. You know, the struggle for freedom in South Asia provided new forms of politics. And we need to re-embrace those. Afghanistan is a point of intersection. We want to become the Asian roundabout. For thousands of years, we were the Asian roundabout. Every conceivable idea in antiquity to the 18th century came through us and went through us.
So you're not worried that India and Pakistan, for example, none other than Pakistan's former president, Pervez Musharraf, has just said very recently that you're shutting your eyes, Mr. President, you're not...
No, I'm not. Mr. Musharraf is an atavism who has no relevance.
Okay. That sounds good to an Indian audience, but...
No, I mean, he's an irrelevance.
The question is that India and Pakistan, you're not concerned, or are you not overly concerned?
Look, my job as leader of Afghanistan is to make sure we all cooperate. If I give to fears, my people will suffer. They did not elect me. Hydro-generated power, Afghanistan can put about 25,000 megawatts of power on the table. With Central Asia, with TAPI, we can increase this multifold. So it is really important to think through about infrastructure in new ways, but it's not just the pipeline. We must bring the phenomenal engineering talent, computer science knowledge, and others, so that we do the project not in the traditional way, each of these, but do smart grids and allow us to bypass about 40 years of previous technology. With telecom, we did in Afghanistan. When I became finance minister, we had 100 mobile phones. I started the telecom program. Now we have over 20. And people were saying, phone companies were saying, maximum capacity of Afghanistan will be 400,000. In 4 months, their projection was exceeded.
Anuhita? Yeah.
My name is Anahita and I work with Himal South Asian based in Kathmandu. Before I came here, I lived and worked in Afghanistan for 8 years as a journalist. I was in Kabul at your press conference when you procured customs revenue from Dostum and came back to Kabul to announce it. And that was an amazing assertion of rule of law. Subsequently, you were also critical of a lot of the militia leaders, and you were known as one of the few people without blood on your hands. And yet, in the last elections, you chose to make partnerships, including with Dostum, which a lot of people did not understand, citing historical necessity. Are decisions such as yours dooming Afghanistan, and by extension our region, to an endless cycle of violence, what you have termed the burden of history?
Well, thank you. Thank you first for your service to both the region and to Afghanistan in spending 8 years. We like the connections between Kathmandu and Kabul. There's a lot of flow. I think there are about 200 Afghans, at least in Kathmandu, working in Paris, and a lot of Nepalis. Overcoming history requires acknowledging existing forces. We've tried the politics of exclusion. It has not worked. We formed the government of national unity very consciously, learning both from our own past and from positive and negative examples. Iraq is the most recent display of what a government of national division can do. In the past, Afghan elite, since 1876, each time there's been a quarrel among the elite, the people have paid the price. Our philosophy is very direct and open and transparent. We want the elite quarrels to be brought within the walls of the palace. Our disputes within the arena of the state are much easier to deal with than to spell out.
But this accusation that you have blood on your hands and that...
I don't have blood on my hands. Where's the blood? What she said is that I did not have blood on my hands.
Or that you did not have blood on your hands. But this national unity government, Mr. President, that you just spoke about, it's an experiment. We've never had this in South Asia before. Do you think it can work?
Sure it can work, but how many
Your
places,
own CEO...
How many places in South Asia went to stall development and to continuous street demonstrations and repeated cycles because they did not have the willingness to farm? Look, the positive examples of Finland of 1920, Chile of 1990s. Negative examples you can find plenty. A lot of coalition-type governments in Scandinavia have come to learn. We need to take different routes because our countries cannot be run by textbooks. I not only write about fixing failed states, I intend to fix them.
Gaurav?
Your Excellency, my name is Gaurav Sawant. I'm a journalist. I work for the India Today Group. My question to you is, sir, your predecessor, when he came to India, had a long list of weapons that Afghanistan needed, and India was to provide those weapons. We are told you've put that weapons list on hold. Is that true, and if so, why, sir?
We have had wish lists. Once we are ready for real lists, we will talk.
So are you saying then that the Indians are not willing to provide you arms?
No. We have enormously good cooperation. Our systems are different. So this is an issue of detail. It's not issue of grant. Because military procurement, like any other type of procurement, is very distinctive.
Okay.
And we have a range of things, and we are looking at other things, but we're re-examining our national security and our procurement systems. So it's premature.
Okay.
Excellency, my name is Rahul Kamal. There is a strong sense in the strategic community across the world that the Taliban are currently lying low, waiting for the American drawdown to pan out, and as they do, they will rise again. You spoke of national will, you spoke of governance. Militarily, how confident are you, sir, that the Afghan army and the armed forces will be able to beat the Taliban?
Well, two things first. One, political disagreements that result in violence always end up being solved in a negotiating table, rarely in a battlefield. War between governments, between states, ends in victory or defeat. Internal conflicts require political solutions. Peace is an imperative in Afghanistan. But let's also understand, conflict in Afghanistan is not driven by politics, it's also driven by criminality. The global criminal economy is $1.7 trillion a year. The international drug mafia is the largest beneficiary of heroin. Drug production has 4 components: cultivation, processing, transit, consumption, have been kept by elites. I think the movement of acknowledging that we need regional cooperation marks a fundamental shift in attitude in this. So the first word is actually thank you for the new opening, for the new acknowledgement. The second is to create fora, to ensure that the opening gets reinforced. Because what I brought earlier to your attention, political will is a reflection of the larger politics of each individual country. And that's where there are strong limitations. So it is not just a leader-centered or a leader-focused resolution that can bring this. We must broaden the horizon and change the nature of the discussion among interlocutors. You yourselves, you good selves, are critical to this. So the voice of South Asian women, the voice of journalists, academics, and others. Third is that we need to show, and one reason I was focusing on TAPI and on power, those are areas that do not threaten interest. We have to begin with areas where new resources can be put on the table that did not exist previously and address fundamental needs. Energy and environment, I think, are 2 areas where cooperation is most likely, and third would be among educational and scientific institutions.
We don't have very much time left, so the last few questions. The student at the back. And can we also have a microphone for Ms. Hina Rabbani Khan, please?
I'm Aditi Karki, a law student. I'm representing Leadership Academy. Your Excellency, it has been a wonderful experience to hear your insightful words. And to ask you a question, we know we have common problems in South Asia, whether it be terrorism or suppression of minorities or the gender-based violence. And I think it is because of these common problems why we need to look our future region by region. And as you rightly said before that, for this regional cooperation, it is the cooperation that we need most. But cooperation is not something that we develop overnight, or even it is not a single roundtable discussion or a single SARC summit that would develop cooperation. So I would like to ask you, as a youth of South Asia, how would we develop this culture of cooperation?
Well, first of all, via the new technologies. You are you're the 4th generation after 1947. Please look at the world differently. You can look at the world differently in the way, in the minute your generation looks at this and leaves our inherited prejudices, South Asia will start congregating in different ways. I say in my country, and mine is extreme, the young are teaching the old enormously new ways. Our cricket team went from being the backstreets of camps toward championship level. That is the story. They have learned teamwork, they have learned discipline, they have learned imagination, and they compete against the very best and thrive. Your generation has this possibility. So it is really important that while you appreciate the work of the previous generations, do not become prisoner of it.
President Ghani, Hinar Banikar. We've been on meetings together, endless meetings, and I just wanted to say and put it on record as a Pakistani, how inspiring not only what you're saying, but what you're doing is. It is really a breath of fresh air in the South Asia region. Afghanistan as being a new entrant, I think you could be a welcome country and a welcome leader. You are somebody who's not espousing the past, but really trying to be a maker of the future. So I want to fully support that, and also to share with everyone that a small sign that you sent in resolving the TAPI issue to Pakistan, just a small sign on just resolving the issue of the tariff, it had gone a long way in building the confidence that was missing in this relationship. His recent trip to also Pakistan has been really very, very confidence building. So just to say that we hope collectively that instead of Afghanistan being a point of contention between the region, you would be the point of congregation. And I see you to be presenting really all the signs for that.
But can I just say, Mr. President, that Ms. Carr has been so appreciative of what you've been doing. But I'm just wondering, as a journalist, if I can ask another question, which is that until a few months ago, the former president, Mr. Hamid Karzai, was so critical of what was happening from Pakistan. The soil of Pakistan was being used by terrorists, militants, whatever you might call them, for acts of violence against Afghanistan. What has changed?
What's changed is the re-examination of the issue.
Okay.
We're mutually dependent. You know, we have a poem that says, when one part of the body hurts, the entire body is in pain. There is an emerging consensus that the network of violence that have emerged recently are unprecedented in history because they're not after taking political power, they're after destroying state systems. And we need to examine our mutual dependence. Our mutual dependence can provide the ground for mutual cooperation. So it's in the re-examination. You know, there was the tragedy of Wagan. I picked the phone and called Prime Minister Sharif. Yesterday he called me back. We need to understand that the two incidents are rooted in the same causes. They cannot be good terrorists or bad terrorists. We need to understand that we have an opportunity. But if this opportunity is lost, the cost would be immense. And the other is to be pragmatic. You know, the old saying, Rome was not built in one day. But we need to think foundationally. We need to look at the deep roots. You know, the example, I'm grateful to Minister Khan, who was a remarkable foreign minister. You know, we were negotiating for months, for years. I want the projects to go. I'm not going to be penny wise and pound foolish. And that is important to build confidence, because we must move forward, and that's something new must be put on the table. The day energy from Afghanistan and from Azerbaijan into Turkmenistan reaches Delhi and onwards, you will see a different world opening. And it is going to take a lot of overcoming, a lot of opposition. I was just recently reading a remarkable article on the social genesis of the European Union. Both the French president and the German chancellor were under enormous pressure not to do what they did. But they did move. And you know, sometimes taking a risk is worth it.
So you're saying India and Pakistan, the leaders of India and Pakistan should put their animosities aside and chart out a new future?
Yes, and all of us need to put our animosities aside.
Ashok?
President Karzai, I beg your pardon, President Ghani. My name is... Yeah. Thank you. My name is General Ashok Mehta, and I convene the India Policy Group on Afghanistan, which networks with the Afghanistan Policy Group, which has produced a regional declaration which also seeks neutrality for Afghanistan. My question is twofold. There are two deadlines in Afghanistan in the future, in 2016. One is legitimizing what people call the artificial arrangement of the national unity government. That has to be approved by the lower jirga and then legitimized by 2016. The other deadline is complete troop withdrawal by 2016 of the Americans. But the BSA that you have signed, you and CEO Abdullah, says, it reads that American troops can stay at nominated bases till 2024 and beyond. So what does that mean?
What that means is what it says. Each side to the agreement can change the agreement with notification. Our horizon, the decade of transformation, a phrase that I coined and President Karzai very graciously accepted, is 2014 to 2024. All our planning premises, designing the withdrawal of the international forces, NATO ISAF forces, has been based on a decade where Afghans will own and lead the transformation process. But during this decade, we still need assistance and we need to understand the changing conditions. So the framework is that President of the United States has made a decision regarding his country's relationship, but simultaneously reaffirmed full commitment regarding financing of our security forces and assisting them till 2024.
Absolutely. The last question, Mr. President, from Nalin Kohli from the BJP.
Mr. President, that was really very inspiring, very insightful, and certainly a message of hope. I'm sure everyone in this room certainly enjoyed every word of it. My question is away from security and terrorism. You said something amazing in terms of women who had not stepped out for 30 years, and 38% of them voted. That's a phenomenal message. And of course, we understand that there have been challenges that your country has faced, particularly on the gender issue. Specifically, would that be equally, almost, as your security challenges you're looking at so optimistically? Do you see that as a big challenge also, translating and changing attitudes and giving them a more responsive and responsible role within nation building?
Yes, thank you for asking that. You know, I'm tired of slogans of women's empowerment that do not engage the women in economic empowerment. So my challenge to our North American, European, Japanese colleagues, please don't do seminars, connect us to your chains of department stores. Help. We can only avoid the threat by cooperation.
Okay, so we no longer really need to fly the flag that we've been flying for so many decades. But I'd like to ask you to sort of help you move away, if you like, to your own country. South Asia, you know, we've talked about how this troubled neighborhood that we live in. But you live in an exceptionally troubled country. The American troops are going to leave sooner than later, and your own security forces are going to take charge. Are you nervous?
No. I led the security transition for 3 years. I've been to every province of Afghanistan 3 to 10 times. I've been to every is gradual, but I think a systematic change. Second, we require elite institutions such as yourself. So please don't put yourself on the other side. You're no longer in the category of the ultra poor. You're part of the very privileged.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. No, but the cultural elite needs to articulate an agenda that is really based on communication and cooperation. Our medias have been as responsible for our separations as have been other components of the elite. So I hope that that also requires attention. But the third element is our universities, our thought leaders. The level of connectivity. When I find South Asians, for instance, when I was teaching at Johns Hopkins or at Berkeley, we all congregated regardless, or at the World Bank. We had immense friendship.
All the South Asians congregated.
All the South Asians. But when we go and lead our institutions, then it's our national thing. And this is the last. The inherited sense of state structures from Europe of 16th century is my nation right or wrong. Mm-hmm. Now we need to understand that the nation-state system, the state system, is under threat in garrison. Every corps command. I know every single general in the Afghan army, police, and security forces. Look, we're patriots. I want to exaggerate a point. Entering Afghanistan is very easy. Getting out of it is another proposition if people come in violence.
But are you saying that you don't need the American troops? You don't want them to stay?
Look, it's two different things. The American troops were needed in a particular moment in history. That moment has passed. They're leaving on December 31st, 2014, as agreed. But they're staying to help.
Can I ask you, Mr. President, you talk about, you're very frank about this, but the fact is that it's people like us who suffer these sort of animosities that elites have.
But it's not that simple. Part of it is that we require several fundamental changes in culture. First, the culture of the state. Mm-hmm. The culture of the state and the culture of the people has often been confused. We are in the middle of changes in the inherited hierarchical cultures of the state. In this